The Echo in the Pines. It was the perfect spot, far from any city, deep in the woods, under a canopy of ancient pine trees. The kind of place where the only sound you heard at night was the wind brushing through the trees. A place where you felt completely isolated, alone with nature. Or so they thought. "Can you believe this place?" Jack said, setting down his pack beside the fire pit. "No one for miles, just us in the wild." Anna, his girlfriend, smiled and nodded, but she kept glancing around the thick forest. The trees seemed to press in from all sides, their tops swaying lightly in the breeze while the undergrowth remained deathly still. "It's beautiful, I guess," she replied, though her voice lacked enthusiasm. Tara and Luke, the other couple in their group, were busy setting up their tent. Tara had already pulled out a bottle of whiskey and was pouring generous shots for everyone. To escaping the madness of the city. Tara cheered, holding up her cup. Everyone joined in, laughing as they clinked their cups together. But as night fell, the laughter slowly died down, replaced by the eerie quiet of the woods. The fire crackled softly as they sat in a circle, the warmth of the flames barely keeping the creeping chill at bay. The stars above were obscured by the towering pines, and the only light came from the dim glow of the fire. "Anyone else feel like we're being watched?" Anna asked, staring out into the shadows beyond the firelight. Jack chuckled, trying to shake off the uneasy feeling that had been gnawing at him ever since they arrived. "It's just the wilderness. Your mind plays tricks on you when it's this quiet." "No, seriously," she insisted, her voice lowering to a whisper. "Something feels wrong." Luke looked up from his phone, the only one who managed to get a faint signal. "There are stories about these woods, you know. They say people go missing here every few years." Tara rolled her eyes. "Don't start, Luke." "No, really," he continued, his voice taking on a sinister tone. "The locals say it's not just people getting lost. They talk about something that lives in the trees. They call it the Echo." Jack snorted. "The Echo? Sounds like a lame campfire story to me." Luke leaned in, his face lit eerily by the fire. "They say it can mimic voices. Sometimes, you'll hear your own voice calling you deeper into the woods. Sometimes, it'll sound like your friends. But if you follow it, you never come back." Anna shivered, hugging herself tighter. "That's not funny, Luke." "I'm not trying to be funny," he said, dead serious. "Look it up. There's a whole subreddit about it. People swear it's real." All right, Tara interrupted, sensing the tension. "Let's change the subject. We didn't come here to freak each other out." But the mood had already shifted. The wind picked up, causing the trees to creak and groan. Every snapping twig in the distance seemed to echo louder than it should have. A branch cracked somewhere behind them, and Anna jumped. "Did you hear that?" she asked, her eyes wide. "Probably a deer," Jack said, though his voice wasn't as confident as before. Tara stood up and stretched. "I'm going to the tent. All this ghost talk has me wiped out." Luke followed, and soon, only Jack and Anna remained by the fire. "We should turn in too," Anna whispered, staring into the flickering flames. Jack nodded, but as he stood up, he heard something, faint, almost imperceptible, but undeniably there. A voice. His voice. "Jack," it whispered from the darkness. "Come here." He froze, every muscle in his body tensing. "Did you hear that?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Anna looked at him, confused. "Hear what?" "It sounded like me," he said, glancing nervously into the black woods. "Jack, stop it. This isn't funny." But he wasn't laughing. The voice called again, this time clearer, closer. "Jack, over here." Anna grabbed his arm. "Let's go to the tent. Now." They hurried to the tent, zipping it shut behind them. But the forest didn't stay quiet for long. From outside, they began to hear the unmistakable sound of footsteps crunching on leaves. Slow, deliberate, encircling their camp. "Is that Luke and Tara?" Anna whispered, clutching Jack's arm tightly. I don't think so, Jack replied, straining to listen. The footsteps were heavy, too slow to be human. Then came the voice again, closer this time, just outside the tent. But it wasn't Jack's voice anymore. It was Anna's. "Jack, come outside," it called softly. "It's okay. Come out." Anna's breath hitched in her throat. That's my voice." Jack shook his head, pulling her closer. "Stay quiet. Don't move." The footsteps stopped, and for a moment, there was only the sound of their breathing, ragged and shallow. Then, the voice came again, but it was no longer soft. It was insistent, angry. "Jack, come out. Now." The tent shook violently as if something large had brushed against it. Anna stifled a scream, and Jack held his breath. They could hear it breathing outside. A deep, raspy sound, like something struggling to fill its lungs. And then, silence. The footsteps retreated, fading back into the forest. For what felt like hours, they didn't move, didn't speak. Finally, when the first light of dawn began to filter through the trees, they unzipped the tent cautiously. The campsite was still, untouched. The fire had burned down to embers, and there was no sign of anything having been there. But as they turned to wake Luke and Tara, their blood ran cold. The other tent was wide open, torn from its stakes, and empty. Their friends were gone. "No, no, no, no," Anna muttered, running to the shredded tent. She called their names, her voice growing more desperate with each shout. Jack followed, his heart pounding in his chest. "Luke! Tara! Where are you?" But the only response was the wind through the trees. Then, from somewhere deep in the forest, they heard it. "Jack! Anna!" It was their friends' voices, calling from the darkness. But something was wrong. The voices were distorted, hollow, echoing in a way that made the hair on the back of Jack's neck stand up. "Jack! Anna!" They both froze, staring into the woods. The voices were coming closer, weaving through the trees. "Luke?" Jack called out hesitantly. "Tara?" But deep down, he knew it wasn't them. "We have to go," Anna whispered urgently. "We need to leave. Now." They grabbed what little they could, abandoning their tents and supplies, and started running. The forest seemed to close in on them, the trees twisting into grotesque shapes as the voices followed them, always just behind, always calling. "Jack! Anna, don't leave us." But they didn't stop. They ran until their lungs burned and their legs threatened to give out. Only when they reached the edge of the forest, where the trees thinned out and the sun broke through, did the voices finally stop. They collapsed on the ground, gasping for breath, too afraid to look back. What was that?" Anna asked, her voice trembling. "I don't know," Jack replied, staring into the dark line of trees. "But we're not going back." And as they walked away from the forest, the wind carried one last echo, faint and distant. "Jack! Anna!" It was waiting for them to return. But they never did.
Don't forget to subscribe.